Joe here. There's no fights right now. There was no fights this weekend. So what am I covering? Nothing. Doing a hot take video, and I have a scorching of the hottest of takes. So it's a fun one here. I have a hot take, and I don't think this is that hot of a take, but it's just something I think is worth discussing. I've heard a lot of this from my I don't want to say casual friends. I want to say my friends who love the sport and who keep up with the sport relatively. Um, but they're not quite a hardcore fan. They're not quite a casual fan. I think that like in betweener. I have a lot of friends in that in betweener kind of spot, and so yeah, in these in betweener kind of spot where I keep hearing a constant opinion about them, and they all the opinion is always the same thing. The opinion is always um, that the UFC is going to die off. MMA is going to die off because of Dagestani wrestling styles. So so obviously I disagree with that. I disagree with that because personally think for people say I heard some of these friends say Habib was boring. No, of all of them, Habib was probably the least boring of them all. Makachev is so surgical that it can't. I can understand someone saying it's boring. I don't personally think so, but he's not like a Justin Gaethje, of course, but he's not like I'm not, oh, I can't miss a Makachev fight. Like if he wasn't champion, I wouldn't be like, oh, I can't miss a Makachev fight. Whereas like a Charles fight, a Gaethje fight, a Dustin Poirier, like any of these, like those guys, those three guys, Tony in his prime obviously would be up there, and Habib was a guy I was like, I'm not missing a Habib fight because very aggressive, very fun stylings for me. Those guys they used their strengths very entertainingly. So this one is I don't think that's the case. I think what is killing if MMA is being killed off, then oh my god, my camera's a little filter. If the UFC is being killed off, or MMA really, or I just keep saying the UFC because that's what brings me to this point. What's going to do it? I think I think it's currently the UFC model. Now, the current UFC model is, for lack of better terms, ass and very anti-consumer. And that's a current thing right now with a lot of things in our media. Streaming has become anti-consumer. I love having ads on Hulu. That's fun. Amazon Prime, where I used to not have ads in Amazon Prime, I have ads in now, but I can get rid of those ads. They give me ads, but I can get rid of those ads if I pay money. I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube Premium eventually kind of moves to a model where it's like, no, 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 we just give you more access to better stuff, or something like that with no ads. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep, very, very Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader. He's like, pray I don't alter the deal any further. So very kind of hits that thing. Disney Plus is incredibly like if you do the bundle with like Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN, uh, you know, then it's actually not that bad on the wallet. That said, when you're going to buy a pay-per-view or anything like that, which pay-per-view model has been dead for a long time, UFC still clinging on to it. That's a whole other topic. It's the same topic. We're gonna get into that, but um, it's expensive. It's like $80 in America right now, 80, $90. Um, so it makes being a fan a very expensive thing. I still have my Fight Pass subscription. I still pay for my Fight Pass because I enjoy Fight Pass. I love being able to you know be like, hey, like, oh, you're interested in the sport, or like you haven't seen this fight, let's pull it up, and like I currently, not to shed too much light into my own personal life, I don't want to be an oversharer. Very, very open and honest with you guys, of course, but I've had some complaints, of course, for being like, oh, Joe's always talking about chicks he's had on dates and stuff like that. Well, it's just personal stories, I try to use a personal story to connect, but uh Anyways, a romantic interest of mine currently is not a fight fan at all. She's never been like into sports, but she knows I am, and so we're making plans to go see a Thunder playoff game because I'm going today now. It's Sunday now, but I'm going to go to a playoff game today. And she heard about this. She was like, "Oh, we should go if the Thunder make a good run. We should try to go to one." Yeah, let's do it. I'm down. But she also, but I told her, I said, yeah, if you want to watch some fights one day, I can show you some good fights to kind of beginner level and start moving you up. And I think because I have fights, of course, that you know I can get into. I might toss those in at the end. I always remember them, the noggin of like beginner fights to the really kind of crazy ones. Um, for if anyone's interested in those, I'll probably throw them in at the end here, depending on how long I can rant on this. But the UFC model, I believe, is a problem right now. So as I've said, it's very expensive just to buy the streaming service. Then you got to buy a pay-per-view model. And what sport does that? Where they have a subscription model, and then you got to pay by pay-per-view. So because boxing, you need like obviously you need like Showtime and like all that. I think Days In, I believe you have to have their subscription to buy their card, which is kind of frustrating um, and stuff like that. But I always think of back in the day, professional wrestling. Professional wrestling, they used to that was because that was like what I grew up on a lot was like professional wrestling. Okay, who's so one person in my family would get the professional wrestling card, and someone would get the Pride card, and then someone would get the UFC card, right? And then everyone would all chip in, kind of thing like that, and help out. Back when I was growing up, that's kind of how it was. And professional wrestling, they actually did something pretty slick. WWE specifically. What they went to is they had their own streaming platform and WWE Network, I believe it's called. I can't remember, having used it in a long time. But this is what they used to do. Now it's a little different. Now you have to have a Peacock, but it's still the same model. And it's like, hey, if as long as you have a subscription, you can watch our pay-per-views, our premium live events for free. And I think that's a very good model. I think that is an incredibly good model, um, going on. And I think the UFC should do something like that. That's very pro-consumer. A lot of money was made by WWE in that. You can check their financial makings. They went public around that time as well, so that was obviously helping out a lot. And even in periods of time where their product, in terms of fan reception, was at its all-time lowest, they were still making crazy money. So fans were hating the product, but the product was still being viewed, which was still generating money, which was still being, you know what I mean? So clearly that format is a moneymaker, you know. So that is something I've wished the UFC would do because they're in a similar vein. Approval for this product is at I don't want to say an all-time low, but it's been pretty low lately. It's been as of you know what I mean? I'm a lifelong fight fan, and I'm always down to watch fights. And But this year, last year, and the year before have been rough. Been very, very rough as a fight fan. We've had some great fights. We've had some great cards. Don't get me wrong. We've had some incredible fights, some incredible cards. Overall, product has been not great. A lot of it is matchmaking. A lot of it is matchmaking, I believe. And then let's go to my next point. The big problem is the quantity of cards. Now, this is another proposal I have to try and fix this UFC model. To fix the UFC model, I think we should kind of treat the UFC a little different. Now, what do I mean by that? I think we create a system of promotions. So the UFC has access to the Pride. I don't think they have Pride. Well, they obviously they own Pride now, but I don't think you need to do that. That might not be the best call to use that one. I think you bring back Strikeforce and WEC, and I think you probably, I don't know if they have a really good relationship with Invicta. I wouldn't mind to see Invicta kind of get taken in by this if that means more money towards their fighters and everything like that. Because that's another problem we have. A lot of money problems towards the fighters and stuff like that. And that's the one fear I have with this model. I want to stress. I'm not saying I have a foolproof plan. I've never gone to a business school. I don't know. I don't. I'm just as a fan trying to help out. You know. They don't want the help, but tough luck. I'm trying to give it to them anyways. Um, I think we should kind of bring back WEC and Strikeforce, and I think you create tiers in a sense of what level of the game you want. And I think you still keep the contender series and you treat those moments as promotions to jump up. So how does this work? So WEC, we'll just say W. I don't care what order you put them in. UFC should be at the top. Then you have WEC and Strikeforce, let's say, or Strikeforce WEC. And then you have WEC and you have fighters on there. You have the weight classes you want on there. You can even have Strikeforce do other weight classes that you don't want. Because I know some people will be like, I only want to see big boys fight. Some and meet people like me, it's like, oh, there's heavyweight fights on this card. Oh, okay, sure, I'll sit through it. So I think maybe you can even go that way. Kind of have, smaller weight classes for WEC, which was, what they used to do. It was great. And I think the heavier weight classes, because Strikeforce has a history of middleweight and up being very prestigious. They had Fedor, obviously. They had Overeem, Verdum, Daniel Cormier got his start in there as well. Frank Mir nearly fought Strikeforce for a Daniel Cormier match, which I thought was kind of a fun bit of trivia. You might not know. In 205, you had Dan Henderson, you had Fei Zhao, you had King Mo, Gegard Mousasi, 185, Jacare. Tim Kennedy fought in there, but he was never champion. But Jacare was the big one for a long time. And Luke Rockhold, of course, which had some bangers in that fight as well. Some absolute bangers of those. Wow, Strikeforce was just great in general. But welterweight and up, welterweight as well. You had Tyron Woodley, you had um, Nate Marquardt. There's someone else I'm going crazy of. Tarek Safadine, who was awesome in Strikeforce. Ooh, Nick Diaz. Like, it was great. Welterweight and up, you can say that's that, of course. And you kind of treat these as your fight nights. These are fight nights with belts. So instead of having, next week we have Corey Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. Instead of having hypothetically, oh wow, Bo Nichols on that card, but like Santiago Ponzinibbio, Daniel Rodriguez, that's not necessarily Junior Tafa, like a Tafa brothers fighting. Like no one really, no offense to them, we're not like that isn't like a fight that's gonna make us go, oh, I'm so pumped. It's a filler fight, you know. Um, and there's a lot of fights on the undercards and stuff like that because of all this contender. We have too many fighters on the roster currently and we can kind of spread it out among three different things. And you use Strikeforce and WEC as your fight nights. They're the fights you're showing on like television, and people who get confused, like the casual audiences, you brand it as the UFC presents Strikeforce Fight Night Ponzinibbio versus Daniel Rodriguez. And well, what do you do about, well, okay, then what's the UFC then? Well, or how do guys promote up? You have people like your champions have the option of being like, okay, I want to move up. I want to go to the UFC or I want to defend this belt and then I'll move up. They have a choice of when they want to move up. I think you have it after every fight, you have a chance of moving up, you know, and I think you could actually have some fun, natural storylines in that. Hypothetically speaking, let's say Sean O'Malley is champion of WEC. He beats Cheeto Vera in WEC. Then he's like, yeah, well, Marab's the clear number one contender. I don't want that. I'm going to go up to the UFC. Marab goes, gets the belt. Then he goes to the UFC. Now you have a beef there because you have the potential ducking. And the UFC is the pay-per-views you run. And if you have your pay-per-views where it is the best of the best, every fight matters. I think you take the top 25 to 35 max of each division. Obviously, some divisions you're going to be like, well, they don't really have that many fighters. It's when time to bring them in. Time to start outsourcing and get some talent in. Um, I think, and that's the case, you take the top 35, every fight matters, every fight has stakes, and I think you have this bonus. You can drop out. You can get kicked out of the UFC and you get sit back down in the Strike Force. You know, if that isn't gonna put a chip on your shoulder, like I got kicked out of the UFC and now I'm like a top 10 guy in Strikeforce now. Hypothetically, like a Kevin Holland. Let's say Kevin Holland drops out. It's like, okay, you're in Strikeforce now. Middleweight or welterweight, whatever you want to do. People are going to be like, fighters are going to want to fight him because they're going to go, oh, this guy had wins in the UFC. I want to move up and get to that higher paycheck and be the one on pay-per-view, have a chance for stardom. I want to fight this guy. And Kevin Holland's going to be like, man, I'm losing out. I need this. I want to move back up. And I think that could help with motivation out a little bit. I think that creates situations where matchmaking is easier because the UFC has little to no effort in their matchmaking openly, it feels like. They just kind of whatever's easy, let's do whatever's easy. Their matchmaking is bad, like really, really bad right now, and we have less filler. And you can still do contender series, like Ultimate Fighter. You can still do these things because sometimes you want an influx of talent, and it's like, hey, we had like 5 guys retire out of here. Okay, well, let's do some contender series matches of guys that we've been watching in WC and Strikeforce that we want to promote up. And you can still push your big names and keep them protected by putting them in contender series matches to move them up a division, to move them up, not divisions, but into promotions, move them into the Strikeforce. So there's the UFC's incentive. Like, if you have a Sean O'Malley, you're not going to give him a wrestler. You're not going to put him in there against like a Marab or something like that. You're going to be like, yeah, Sean O'Malley, we've been keeping your eye on you. So we want you in the UFC. We're going to put you in a matchup. I'm just using him because he's like a golden boy of the UFC in current reign. This isn't like a hate thing. He's just been a protected, pushed guy. I don't like Sean O'Malley, but I'm not trying to pick on him all the time. He's just the first name. But anyways, we want you. We're gonna have you fight. We're thinking we're gonna have you fight Eddie Wineland for the promotional match. And Eddie, hey, if you win, you'll come to the UFC for a last run. Of course, Sean O'Malley. I mean, how that fight went. Bounces up. And like guys like think about this. Cody Garbrandt, and realistically in this world would have probably fallen out of the UFC. And then how much of a feel good story would that be? It's already a pretty good feel good story when he was winning some fights here and there. How much of a feel good story would that be if he got a belt at like WEC? It's like, oh wow, he became champion again. Or he fought for the title again at WEC, and it's like, let's say he wins somehow, and it's like, I want to go back. I want to go back to the UFC. Like that's a feel good story. Aldo had a bad run at one point. The greatest of all time had a bad run at one point, and then he bounced back with that win over Jeremy Stevens. Imagine that fight where it's like Jeremy Stevens, this is him trying to make a big push for the thing, big push towards the title, like it was at the time, and this is Aldo trying to stay in the UFC. And how much of a moment would that have been if we knew those real stakes? Instead of we're pushing him into retirement, it's a like and because fighters don't like to retire and they kind of stick around and they kind of stick around too long. So here's a ways we can keep them around without this sounds disrespectful and I don't mean it that way. I hope no one takes it this way, but in my brain it kind of does. So I apologize. Instead of using them as filler on cards. This is just a this is just an idea. I haven't put a ton of thought into this. This has been like an idea I floated around maybe once every 3 months, you know, for like the last couple years. But this is just something I think about because, especially nowadays, because Lord, is this current model of the UFC very difficult as a fan. The product has taken a hit because of this. They have a much more higher emphasis on quantity over quality, and that drives me insane. Um, that's just me. Then, anyways, that's it for me. We will have a preview show this weekend, or not this weekend. Is it not this weekend? It's next weekend, isn't it? Yeah, it's next weekend. 'Cause this weekend is uh, Gary and Carlos Prates. So, Ian Machado, Gary, Carlos Prates. So, spoiler alert, I'm picking Prates to win. Oh, I did say here's just 3 fights. I'll do three fights to kind of three beginner fights, each one much more higher on the ladder than the last for if you're trying to introduce someone to the sport. I think always a good one, a good number one I have is I'm a personally a big fan of this one. I think it's a sick fight. I think I always put at the last end of it. This is not the first beginner one, mostly because I've been thinking about this fight a lot lately. Is Shogun Dan Henderson. I think that's probably the last step of beginner ones because there's a moment in round five where like it's a 10-8 round in my book. Shogun's just bashing on Hendo from mount and it isn't stopped. I could see that scaring people away. You know, it hasn't yet for me, but I show that fight off a lot. Number one, I show the first beginner fight I show people is I show them Gaethje Michael Johnson because that fight is crazy. It doesn't have like the highlight reel KO finish. It's just like a knee in the clinch and he slumped and they call it. Um, and but I think that's a really really good one. Third, or the second one in the middle, I show them is of course CM Punk versus. No, I couldn't keep a straight face and say that one. I'd honestly show them well, Robbie Lawler versus Bobby Volkner. I show them that one because Robbie's the man, and it's good to kind of get him out there. I show them that one, and it's a highlight reel KO. It's a pretty good one because I don't do a lot of grappling at first. I try to show them striking, and then kind of mix it, then start slowly mixing in grappling matches. Another great one that is very very fun. I would be willing to show is almost any Cain Velasquez match once they kind of break past that second fight. But I'm sure everyone has like their own kind of like fights they use to introduce people to fights. There's a lot of like really good fights out there, but I'm kind of catering this towards showing a romantic interest because a lot of them are like, oh, I don't want to see anything too crazy, and it's like, oh, okay. Well, I know what they mean by crazy. They mean like overly violent. And the Gaethje Johnson one is incredibly violent, but it's funny enough, I feel like that's more condensable or more consumable for people. Funny enough for how violent that one is. Anyways, that's it for me. I've talked for about 24 minutes now. Um, Thanks for letting me rant. And I'm Joe with the INC. We'll be back to see you soon. I'll be back this weekend for the recap. Peace.